Tonight we take a look at state nomination numbers handed out and find some serious concerns. Claire O'Neill talks about what's coming up next in the Migration Review, Indian students facing more bans and restrictions on Australian universities, and more, so stay tuned. Welcome to Australian Immigration News, proudly brought to you by Australian Immigration Law Services right here in Sydney. And it's great to be back in the office once again. We lead tonight with a look at the number of nominations approved for the 190 and 491 visas. The department recently updated its Skill Select data, outlining the number of nominations granted to state-sponsored visa applicants. Whilst most states and territories have been responsible in allocating their numbers evenly during the year, the data raises some serious concerns about the practices of Queensland and New South Wales governments. You can see from the department's table here the number of nominations given across all states and territories up until the 31st of March this year. Next, you can see here the total number of places allocated to the states and territories for this financial year. What concerns us is that Queensland has only allocated about 50% of its places for the 190 and 491 visas with just 3 months to go. And incredibly, New South Wales has only assigned about 1/3 of its 491 visa quota with also just 3 months to go. This New South Wales figure is amazing at a time the New South Wales regional communities are crying out for more migrants to live in their towns, as 7 Breakfast reported recently.
Leaders and mayors in regional New South Wales are calling for more measures to be introduced to drive an influx of migrant workers away from the city and into the bush. Would like to see them here on the mandatory 5-year term. For more, I'm joined by school principal John Southern in Trundle. Good morning to you, John. Well, a small town in central New South Wales you are. How beneficial would it be to have migrants work in your town?
Matt, if it's done right, it'd be absolutely amazing. We need some new families. We need young families coming to our town. My school's dropped its numbers. We need professional people. We need nurses. We need teachers. We need these people to come and enrich our lives. We would accept them. So
what would you like to see the government do to incentivise them coming out and living there?
Mate, what needs to be done is some genuine consultation with country towns to start off with, not the large political parties model where they throw the Cuba on and shine the R&Williams. Great products, but really we need genuine consultation. We need people to come here and look at our population mix and talk to us, talk to people on the ground.
It would seem that the New South Wales government is not bothering to get out there and talk to these regional towns and see what they need.
So what sort of skills would be required, particularly in your town?
We need people from all types of professions. We need people from shearers, farm workers, right up through to doctors, teachers, those type of people.
Treasury New South Wales has been hoarding up its precious 491 sponsorship allocations. Why exactly? We don't know, but something comes to mind. Precious! We can only hope that Treasury New South Wales will go out and listen to the pleas of regional New South Wales who need these 491 visa holders.
We will embrace them and give them all the advantages and some of the challenges, unfortunately, of living in the country. But we need governments on side.
Hopefully we do see some change. John, enjoy the school holidays. Thanks for joining us.
And for those tens of thousands out there waiting for another 189 invitation round, let's hope May brings you what you desire. The findings of the Migration Review program is going to be released before the 9th of May budget, and we expect the Minister will give some major announcements when she gives a speech at the National Press Club next week. The Australian Financial Review has already been talking about what leaks have been handed to them, saying business investor in innovation programs are likely to be completely axed. The Global Talent Visa will probably be significantly reduced, not scrapped altogether, for Australia still needs a visa which recognises and encourages those with distinguished talents to migrate here. Given the recent hysteria in the local media here about the number of people who have come to Australia recently, Claire O'Neill was asked by the ABC if we can handle the rush of those who wish to come here.
Are we running too hot? Have too many simply come in too short a time or late?
So I think the best the best determinant of that is what is happening in the labour market. And you'll note, Greg, that the unemployment rate remains historically quite low right now. But I really just want to make sure people understand the migration process we're going through at the moment is not about bringing more people into the country. That is a decision for the government of the day based on the economic circumstances in the labour market at that time. Our priority is always about having quality jobs for Australians. The point of the review is whatever size this program looks like, is it delivering the needs of the country at any point in time? The clear answer to that right now is no, and that's why we're moving to fix the system.
During this interview, the Minister outlined that the planned architecture of the changes will be released for discussion, but the actual implementations of these plans will take time. On this basis, we predict that many of the skilled visa programs will stay in place for the next financial year, for there is little likelihood of legislation being written, passed by Parliament, and ready to go before July next year. We also predict there will be significant tweaking of business sponsorship visa occupation lists to make it easier for the current 482 visa holders to be sponsored for permanent residency. Let's see if we are right in next week's edition. On Tuesday, the Sydney Morning Herald ran a story about 5 Australian universities that have placed bans or restrictions on Indian students from specific Indian states because of serious concerns about fraudulent applications. It seems that Victoria University, Edith Cowan University, the University of Wollongong, Torrens University and Southern Cross University have either placed restrictions, bans or crackdowns on the genuine temporary entrant requirements. This news came out early Tuesday morning and was quickly put to the Home Affairs Minister as she happened to be on the ABC National Morning Breakfast Show.
There's a story today as well that 5 universities are banning students from specific Indian states because of what they believe is a surge in fraudulent applications. Does the colossal jump in 408 class visas, which allow international students to work in Australia, suggest rorting to you?
It's a really important export for our country, and I'm pleased to see students coming back into the country. I think the issue for us is that the student system is both one of the biggest assets that we have in our migration system, because we're basically bringing brilliant young people from around the world here into our country, training them up in our brilliant education system. And for many of those people, they should get the opportunity to work for a period of time here in our country. It is also one of the main avenues through which exploitation occurs. And so we have to balance these two things. I think the reporting that was done today shows a system that's actually working. That reporting demonstrated that my department is becoming aware of concerns around the ways in which this system is working properly.
In actual fact, this issue is nothing new, and over the last 2 decades we have witnessed the rise and fall in concerns about fraudulent student visa applications, and not all just from India. Another major concern is how international students are fleeced by education agents due to the high kickbacks they receive from Australian education providers. Unfortunately, education agents are not regulated, and corruption is rife in the industry, and particularly overseas. On Tuesday, a federal parliamentary inquiry into international education held its first session into the unscrupulous behaviour of many education agents. The Western Australian government came in for criticism, citing their program of giving kickback of $1,000 or $500 to agents for every student they enrol into certain Western Australian education providers, and this only makes unscrupulous practice worse. The inquiry has heard that some education agents receive up to 40% commission of a student's course fees. One has to wonder whether the students who use these agents, or in fact any agent, are told how much their money to pay for the course fees are actually going into the pockets of the agents. And since we're on the topic of student visa applications, students should be aware that they should obtain a copy of their visa application from the education agent who lodged it before it's lodged, or at the very least after it's lodged, for remember, you will be responsible personally for any mistakes on the form, not the agent who lodged it for you. Over the past few months, there have been a number of stories in the media regarding Australia's strict rules about meeting visa medical requirements. As a general rule for PR applications, if one member of the family unit fails the medical requirements, then all of the family members fail. The article by the ABC this week highlights the plight of a young family and their son who suffers from haemophilia and suffered a brain injury at birth. The government refused the visa on the basis of the estimated $59,000 per year it costs to look after him, despite the fact that the family themselves have been covering the expenses. Disability advocates are now calling on the government to reform these laws that discriminates against the disabled. Unfortunately, the Migration Act specifically puts it outside the requirements of having to comply with the discrimination laws designed to protect the rights of the disabled. Australia has a $51,000 threshold of medical expenses over a 10-year period for people with ongoing medical issues. If the Commonwealth Medical Officer deems the possible expenses exceed this level, then generally the whole family is refused their visa. For most people with medical issues, the threshold is $51,000 over a 5-year period, so just over $10,000 per year. You can see then that the disabled are discriminated against by having a much lower threshold that knocks them out if their expenses exceed over $5,000 per year. This is a long-running blight on the migration system in Australia, and it reminds me of a sad case I had more than 24 years ago, where the whole family were refused simply because they had a daughter who was blind. The ABC article indicates the government is reviewing the requirements, but it's time to get on with it ASAP. The good news stories this week is the reports in the media that the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, has used his powers of intervention and granted 2 families their permanent residency status. There are thousands of people out there who have contributed greatly to Australia over many years of hard work. They all deserve the right to have a positive minister intervention and be allowed to stay and continue their lives in Australia. In fact, as we've called upon the government before, all of the temporary residents who helped us during the pandemic deserve the same treatment. If you missed our video on this topic, you'll find it in the link at the end of this one. And now it's time again for one of our readers' comments. Tyrone writes in and says, still waiting on the big Anzac announcement for New Zealand citizens living and working in Australia. Well, that's a good question, Tyrone, and we'll let the Minister herself answer that for you.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has told the media in his country that he's coming to Australia this weekend, and he really hopes to be able to land something that, quote, improves pathways for New Zealanders living and working in Australia. What's he referring to there? Is that pathways to citizenship?
So this has been a running sore in the relationship we have with our deeply beloved family and friends across the ditch. There's no 2 countries in the world probably closer than Australia and New Zealand. That's not reflected in public policy, and a lot of your viewers might know that New Zealanders living in Australia have very different rights and entitlements living here than Australians do living in New Zealand. So this is a point that the Prime Minister has talked about quite a bit in the time that he's been the leader of our country, and I think he and the New Zealand Prime Minister have had some good discussions about whether there's any scope to improve that situation.
And clearly there is, if he's flagging an announcement, an agreement. Is that what's in the wind?
So I'll let the Prime Minister speak a little bit more about that.
Well, that's all for another fascinating week in the world of Australian immigration. Things are hotting up fast. In our next edition, we hope to bring you all the full story on what Claire O'Neill has in plan for our new migration system. And if you find it all too confusing, don't give up. Make an appointment to see us and discuss your future plans. We cannot wave a magic wand, but we can give you honest, practical advice. As always, take care out there, and I'll see you next time. So bye for now.